Hey guys, just a quick little video here that I remember Dr. Barry sharing this video, so I'm going to attach it. I'm just going to read you this one little paragraph. Only Julius Streicher went without dignity. He had to be pushed across the floor, wild-eyed and screaming, "Heil Hitler!" Mounting the steps, he cried out, "And now I go to God." He stared at the witnesses facing the gallows and shouted, "Purim fest." Okay, this is one of the guys that got hung that was involved with Hitler. He yells Purim fest. Do you think this is a clue? Why did he yell Purim fest? What's going on there? According to this video that I'm going to attach here, it was October 16th, I believe, 1946. Also, according to this website, October 16th, 1946. If you do a general Google search, it says March. So I think that is maybe wrong. I think it's clear that they got executed in October 1946. Nevertheless, I think it's very interesting. This whole video is really interesting that I'm going to share with you. It matches up with the Jewish year 5707, which is on the Torah calendar, equivalent to 1946. It kind of explains that. But do you think God is giving us a clue to look at Purim as a potential rapture date? I don't know. I have no clue, but I think this video that I'm sharing is, at the very least, very informative, very educational, and worth the watch. Take it easy. Go, Jesus, go. God bless. Maybe we fly on Purim. That's around mid-March.
Welcome to Jewish Wisdom on JTV, the global Jewish channel. Well, the Jewish holiday Purim is just around the corner, so I wanted to share with you something that someone recently showed me, and it kind of blew my mind. So I'd be interested to show it to all of you, to see what you think. And if you're not familiar with the Purim story, let me give you a little bit of a background. It's basically about this Persian tyrant called Haman, who issued a decree to wipe out all the Jews. And through a series of seeming coincidences, Haman ends up being hung on the very gallows that he planned to put his arch nemesis on, a Jewish man called Mordecai. Now, there was a rule in place that if a law was decreed, it was impossible to change it. However, after Haman was killed, the king issued a new decree that if any Jew was attacked by a group of anti-Semites, it was within their rights to fight back. And not only was Haman hung on the gallows, but all of his 10 sons, who were co-conspirators in the plot to wipe out the Jews, were also hanged on the gallows. Now, at this point, I want to look at the character of Haman in a bit more detail. Who was he? Well, why did he want to wipe out the Jews in the first place? Haman was a member of a nation called Amalek. And the Torah is very clear that if you're from Amalek, then you ain't really a fan of the Jews. Amalek believes that blind chance governs the world. Amalek believes there's no such thing as right and wrong. And therefore, they are at war with Judaism and Jewish values. Now, the Torah is very clear that the cosmic battle between Amalek and Jewish values will be fought throughout history. And there have been some who have looked at another, more recent anti-Semitic tyrant and considered whether he too showed signs of adhering to the Amalek principles. I'm speaking, of course, of a man called Adolf Hitler. And what's so interesting about Adolf Hitler is that he didn't just want to wipe out the Jews. It's that this mattered to him more than anything else. He was even prepared to put the war effort at risk by diverting trains delivering troops to the Eastern Front and instead taking them to pick up more Jews in Hungary and send them to their deaths. In fact, in his very last radio address, he stated clearly, quote, "Our battle is between the Jews and the Jews alone." The Nazi ideology was rooted in a godless vision of the world, a vision where might is right, where the strong dominate the weak, where you have survival of the fittest, and the greatest threat to this vision was a vision of morality and conscience, where we should care for the weak and the vulnerable, a vision of ethical monotheism first articulated by the Jews. And this is what Hitler said. He said, "It is true, we are barbarians. It is an honorable title to us. I am freeing humanity from a false vision called conscience and morality. The Jews have inflicted 2 wounds on mankind, circumcision on its body and conscience on its soul. The war for world domination will be fought entirely between us, the Germans and the Jews. All else is facade." So we've got 2 crazy tyrannical leaders in history, Haman and Hitler, both with similar ideologies and with similar aims. Now, here's where it gets interesting. At the end of the Purim story, the book of Esther recalls how the Jews defended themselves against their attackers, and it notes how Haman's 10 sons were all hanged on the gallows. So it says, and the Jews struck at all their enemies with the sword and with slaughter and destruction. They're fighting off these anti-Semites, and did as they pleased to all those who hated them. And in Shushan the capital, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men, including, and then it lists the 10 sons of Haman. So now after Haman's 10 sons have all been hanged, the Jewish queen Esther has a conversation with the king, Ahasuerus, most likely Xerxes. It says, and I quote, that same day, the number of those killed in Shushan the capital was reported to the king. The king said to the queen Esther, in Shushan the capital, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men, including the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's providences? What is your request now? It shall be granted to you. What is your petition further? It shall be fulfilled. The king is saying to Esther basically, listen, whatever you want, I'll give it to you. An iPad, a Ferrari, whatever it is, I'll make it happen. And what does Esther say in return? Have a look. It says, Esther replied, if it pleases the king, allow the Jews of Shushan to do tomorrow as they have done today, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. Esther's asking the king if Haman's 10 sons can be hanged on the gallows. Right. There's one problem with this, which is that we were just told a second ago that Haman's 10 sons were already hung. Why is Esther asking for this to happen again? What does she mean, allow the Jews to do tomorrow what they have done today? She seems to be asking for a repeat of history to take place. And if you want to get a little bit mystical, in Kabbalistic teachings, it is taught that whenever the book of Esther refers to the king, it is also a reference to God. God is never explicitly referred to in the book of Esther. So Esther is somehow, on a deeper level, asking God to repeat the hanging of Haman's 10 sons. What does all this mean? Well, maybe, just maybe, this could be an answer. Fast forward to October 16th, 1946, and check out this New York Times headline. Goering ends life by prison, 10 others hanged in Nuremberg, prison for Nazi war crimes. Doomed men on gallows pray for Germany. There were basically 10 Nazis who were hung at Nuremberg, and it was death by hanging, which, by the way, was a very uncommon form of capital punishment. Interesting. Do tomorrow as they have done today. But maybe this is just a coincidence. Now, it's interesting to note that there were actually 11 Nazis who were meant to be hanged, but one of them actually committed suicide, Hermann Goering, as it notes in the headline. And he committed suicide in his prison cell. And what's interesting is that Haman also had one more child, a daughter. And what happened to her? Well, she actually also committed suicide. Interesting. And by the way, Hermann Goering, the Nazi that committed suicide, was said to have actually worn women's clothing under his Nazi uniform. But maybe it's just a coincidence. But it doesn't stop there. What's interesting about the Nuremberg Trials is that they ended in June 1946, but the sentencing were repeatedly postponed due to appeals for amnesty for Nazis. Strange. Now, hold that thought for a second. It's bizarre that you're getting appeals for amnesty for senior-ranking Nazis, but that's what happened. Now let's have a look at the date on which these 10 Nazis were hung. It was on October 16th, 1946, but the Hebrew year was 5707, or in Hebrew, it's Tuf Shin Zion. As you can see over here, this is the Hebrew year, Tuf Shin and Zion, 5707. That was the date in 1946, October. Now, let's take a look at the book of Esther, where it lists the 10 sons of Haman being hanged. Someone with an astute eye will notice something peculiar about the Hebrew wording. There are 3 letters which appear much smaller than all the others. The first is over here, it's a Tuf. The second is a Shin, and the third is a Zion. Tuf, Shin, Zion. 3 letters much smaller than all the others within the 10 sons of Haman, written in the book of Esther. Now, imagine Esther 2,000 years ago. She's dictating her book to the scribes, and she tells them, when they get to the Tuf, make that a little bit smaller. Same with the Shin, same with the Zion. Why? Why did Esther want to do this? And it's remarkable that Tuf Shin Zion is the year that these Nazis were hung at Nuremberg. Do tomorrow as they have done today. But maybe it could just be a coincidence. But what was Esther's reason? Why did she tell the scribes to make those 3 letters smaller? She probably just said, look, don't worry, 2,000 years from now, they'll do a show on JTV and they'll explain it all. That's probably what happened. But isn't that quite remarkable? But guess what? It doesn't stop there. For anyone familiar with the Jewish calendar, and if they understand how it works, they'll know that when we write the year in Hebrew, we don't actually include the millennium. We assume you know what millennium we're in. It would also be too difficult numerically to write which millennium we're in, as it would require so many letters in Hebrew, because the letters correspond to a certain number. And therefore, Tuf Shin Zayin, which we said is the year 5707, actually only equals the year 707. Tuf is 400, Shin is 300, and Zayin is 7. So while it's quite impressive that the Book of Esther has the year right, it would have been a little bit more impressive if there were a hint to the millennium of the Nuremberg Trials. Or maybe there is. If it occurred in the Hebrew year 5707, then that means that it was the 6th millennium. It was the 6th time the year 707 has appeared in Jewish history. Now, what number does 6 correspond to in Hebrew? Well, it's a Vav. Well, guess what? In the listing of the 10 sons of Haman, there also happens to be one letter which is much bigger, not smaller, much bigger than all the others. Take a look. What is it? Yep, you guessed it. It's a Vav at the very end, which corresponds to the number 6. So we've got 3 small letters which create the year 707, and then we've got one letter that's bigger than all the others, Vav, number 6, the 6th time 707 has appeared. So I mean, you can look at this and you can think whatever you want into it. Most people would tend to be pretty amazed. It seems to be a pretty incredible coincidence at the very least. Now, remember what I mentioned earlier about appeals for amnesty and how crazy it is that they were accepting appeals for amnesty for Nazis. Well, the trial actually ended in June 1946, and had there never been appeals for amnesty, the Nazis would have actually been hanged in the year 5706, not 5707. And I'd be standing here today saying, look how close Esther came to the exact date. It was so close. But they ended up actually postponing the sentencing until after the Jewish New Year in October. So had there not been these appeals for amnesty, the year would have been wrong. And finally, have a look at this. This is a Newsweek article. It was written by an American reporter covering the trial and hangings. It says at the very end of the article, only Julius Streicher, one of the Nazis, went without dignity. He had to be pushed across the floor, wide-eyed and screaming, Heil Hitler! Mounting the steps, he cried out, and now I go to God. He stared at the witnesses facing the gallows and shouted, Purim Fest, 1946. You make your own mind up. Happy Purim.